welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Zone. I'm your co-host, Tom Spitalere, and Bob is back today. Welcome back, Bob. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Nice to be back.
Yeah, it is nice. It's nice to have you back, too. And we've had some great, exciting shows, and this show is to bring the paranormal, the UFO, the ufology, the cryptids, and everything that's out there, including Wiccan, back into the spotlight in a different way. We're bringing in different people with different ideas, and we're going to continue to grow the show as it's been growing. Tonight, I want to welcome back a longtime friend of Bob and myself, Mike Stevens from Granite Sky. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, and hello to both you and Bob.
Hey, how are you, Mike?
Doing well.
So, Mike, after the last show we did, we had a few people go, that was an interesting show with Mike. I had a couple people reach out to us online through the studio and stuff. But they still didn't totally understand what you do at Granite Sky. They still think you go chasing UFOs, and I know you don't. So can we talk a little bit about that first?
Yeah, absolutely. If I ever got to the point where budget and time weren't an issue and I could run a firehouse like they did in Ghostbusters, I would go chase them. But until that happens, what we really do is we work with people after the fact. We deal with people who've had any type of UFO experience, whether it be full-blown abduction, which is a heavy part of the work, because that's the people who really need the most, time to tell their story and feel okay with it and get over the trauma. But to anybody who's just seen a UFO and it's just changed their worldview so much that they don't quite know what to do with it because now they can't help but believe.
Mm-hmm.
And we do
Mike,
that
what do you...
multiple mediums, whether we meet in person, group support, family support, because these things not only affect individuals but families. Basically, any way you can think of that somebody might need help in these things, we try to accommodate.
Mike, what do you think is the common denominator between the people that you have talked to that have been abducted? Is there one or two things that seem to be pretty standard?
I mean, there's similarities between a lot of cases. Sometimes the similarities are, well-known. Sometimes they're not. But the biggest thing we find is that, we're all experiencing a phenomena, but we don't necessarily have a UFO or an extraterrestrial problem. We have a people problem, because after you've had these experiences, there's no one to really share or talk about it with and not feel alone, not be judged, and be supported. So that's really what Granite Sky is about, is trying to be that place where people can feel supported, share their stories, not be judged. And as part of what I do on top of that, if they can't find the strength to have their own voice, I try to be that voice for the community.
Oh, and you do a great job at it. I know that I have known people that have gone through your sessions, and some still do, but they talk very highly of the session and how helpful you and the group has been with them, because it would seem to me, Tom, that these people then are in a culture of other people that have experienced what they've experienced.
Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of it's in the literature. It's historically part of the experience, although we all experience it differently and have our own views of what we've experienced. But there's some of the stuff that when we get into a group setting, there's never been in any of the written literature or anything like that. And people come in and they're like, oh, I don't know if this is part of it, but it's kind of weird. Like, I hope I can say it here. And then somebody across the room will jump up and be like, oh, that happened to me too. Or the next week somebody else will come in and say thing. So we're starting to discover how big, the field is. It's not just the cookie cutter version that, everybody's been told this is what an abduction is and isn't.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so Mike, what is usually the biggest issue that abductees or contactees face?
It's the integration, I think. And what I mean by that is most of us are kind of forced to live a life of duality. In one part of our life, this is very real, this very happened. But in another part of life, you have to be, I'll use it in quotes because I don't really believe in the word in this definition, but, they still got to pay their bills. They still got to go to the grocery store. They still got to, they got to go to work. They still got to do their life stuff. And there's no time to, you can never stop moving forward, and, you have to do these things. You have to eat, you have to sleep, but there's not a lot of time to process this stuff that is eating you inside. There's not a lot of time to, the two worlds don't mix. They almost have to process it internally and still just try to get on with their daily stuff. And that's a struggle for most people.
Yeah, the day-to-day life that you have to continue with. And psychologically, it has to be interrupted because of what they've been through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, that's the big reason we do a lot of what we do is, no matter how you want to look at it, trauma is trauma, whether it comes from a battlefield or an extraterrestrial experience or even a paranormal experience. Trauma is still trauma.
Correct.
There's not our mental health system here in the U.S. I know you guys got listeners from all over the world, but in the U.S., it's not what it should be yet. We have veterans, 22 a day, committing suicide because they can't get the help they need. If they can't get the help they need, can you imagine being an experiencer trying to get the help you need? Is just not there. I mean, there's small outlet groups like myself and others who do great work as well. But, there's not enough of us. It's not commonplace enough that people can get the help we need. And until we can change that, we have a UFO problem. Yeah, maybe. But we definitely have a people problem. And we can't do anything about the other thing, but we can do something about how we treat people after the fact. And that's kind of what we're really about, trying to really push and strive for.
Well, we've seen that in the paranormal where, you get called to a house and they're like, well, we didn't really want to call you in. We went to this person and this person in the family for support, and they laughed at us. And you're dealing with the same thing in the UFO field, obviously, but it's even worse, I'm assuming.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why our whole motto is people not proof. There's a place in the world, for old school ufology, nuts and bolts ufology. People are trying to physically prove it's real and not real. There's a place for that, and I don't have a problem with that. But I kind of look at it like if a building was on fire. We can figure out how the building caught on fire after the fact, but we got to get the people who are in the building out first before we worry about that. And for a long time, ufology's kind of had that situation backwards. We got to prove it before we can listen to anybody.
Well, Mike, let me ask you a question. If what we do know today, at least in the last 3 years, that the government is much closer today to, let's use the word cocoa to the American people about visitations from other universes or planets, solar systems, whatever you define it as. So shouldn't there, in your opinion, shouldn't there be some sort of a tie into that to help these people mentally or physically? In other words, what I'm saying is that the government...
Absolutely. And people talk about disclosure, and I do think the government knows more than they're saying. Do I think they should come forward and say something? Absolutely. But at the same time, people who have been through this don't need the government to tell them this is real. That'd be
Correct.
like the government announcing that pencils are real. Most of us already know it. Like, it's useless information. It doesn't help anybody. What we need is for them to take it a step further and say, yes, this is real. We are now going to address it.
Yeah, but what we really need the government to do is to step up and give these people more formal avenues to express what they've been through and treat them with the respect and the dignity they would or should a veteran.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make comparisons. I don't want to say it's the same thing, but yeah, these people who have experienced these things have gone through their own battles. Maybe not as physical, but on some accounts, definitely as mentally or traumatic. Yes.
Right. And the other thing, Mike, you must experience this. When people are abducted or even visited, it's a lifelong issue they fight, no matter how long ago or how often it happens to them. I've interviewed and talked to people that had experiences 25 years ago with abduction. And yet, that's as real to them today as if it happened yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not just an abductee or an experiencer, whichever word, suits you better.
Right.
When it's happening, you are the rest of your life from that moment on, because there's nothing you can do to stop it or fend it off. You never know when it's gonna happen or if it's gonna happen, so you're always on edge. I know experiencers who they never know what the trigger item's gonna be. I have a gentleman I know in Pennsylvania who was just walking through his kitchen one day. He had his crock pot lid on the counter, like drying after he'd done his dishes, and just the way the light hit it off that little dome shape triggered a memory, and went into an instant panic, flashbacks, and all this stuff. So you're not just an experiencer in the moment. You have to deal with this every moment for the rest of your life.
Right. And also the fear of people being critical of you and not being able to tell your story to people that have some compassion for it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a weird almost subculture of society. It's not anything pleasant or anything people want to talk about, but, rapes happen every day in this country, around the world.
Right.
And nobody would ever dare, laugh at a rape victim because they didn't want to hear their story. But in many cases, we have the same traumatic events, and in some cases, the situation that happens is very much rape-like. It's very sexual, if not, rape in and of itself. With extraterrestrials, but yet somehow it seems societally okay to make fun of experiencers and abductees, but we have this, two-faced, what's acceptable and what's not culture.
Right. Yeah, Tom, if you look at use schools, for example, if a student is in a car accident or something, what does the school do a day or two later? They bring counselors in,
right,
to not only counsel the students that are having a problem, but the parents of those students if they're having a problem.
Right, and everybody else that goes with it. I mean...
Yeah. So why can't that transcend into the government? Why can't... I honestly think, Mike, and I'd appreciate your comment on this. I think that the government should want to hear these stories, should want to start documenting what's taking place, because I think that has to give them a better idea of what to expect. I mean, if you look at a war with any country, I don't care what it is, they interview soldiers, they interview spies, they interview as many people as they can to learn about that particular event. So why the heck is the government not doing the same thing?
Yeah, and to me, it's a great way to look at it. And I'm going to just make this perfectly clear. This is my personal opinion. This is not fact or anything like that. That I believe the government knows more than they're saying. Yeah, we'll start there. But I also believe it goes further, that at some point they turn their head and let this happen for technological advances and this sort of thing. And now their back's against the wall, because not only do they know too much. And if people find out that they let this happen, there's going to be issues. There's going to be class action lawsuits. And I think that's why there's such a wall of denial. Not because they believe that the people are going to run amok if they find out or anything like that. We've all heard those theories. But I think it's because they're actually in too deep.
Well, also, too, when you talk about, what you just said, your opinion, and the class action lawsuits, I mean, okay, so what's the lawsuit going to be filed? That someone saw a UFO? No. The ones that are going to be filed are the ones that have the PTSD or symptoms of PTSD or like symptoms. They're the ones that are going to be filing against doctors, hospitals, government officials, maybe local authorities. I don't know, depending on what it is. I mean, probably the most famous story out there dealing with this, because we've all seen the shows. You know the person personally, Mike, I believe. But I've seen Fire in the Sky. I've seen, the unsolved mystery story of Travis Walton. Look what he went through.
And he's still going through it, because within the culture, he's kind of become famous. And with that, everyone knows his name, everybody knows his story, or the version Hollywood told, and, this and that. He is such a down-to-earth person. He doesn't want this. I've seen him in the back of rooms, like white-knuckling chairs, having to watch like a documentary of his story again, because he has to relive it every time. They've made him go through so many lie detector tests. He's proven it time and time again. But because he's kind of the top dog in this field, or, most well-known story, everybody keeps attacking and attacking him. So not only does he have to live with what he's been through, now he's got to deal with this, the opposite direction of where we should be going, of helping people. He's got to defend himself.
You got a good point there. I mean,
And
I know, was it a couple years ago, Mike, there was some guy following him around basically online and in life challenging everything he said. Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, it's still, even all these years later, they're still coming after him. They're still coming after Betty and Barney Hill, who aren't around to defend themselves. I mean, this is not a field you want to get famous in, because it doesn't help you any. It only brings on more attacks. People are all like, oh, they're doing this for fame, this, that. They want to show. No, nobody I know who's, really been through it wants any of that. They only do it so the next person can find their voice and say, hey, that happened to me. Everybody's story is a key to somebody else's prison. And, I like to think of it as pennies in a jar. You stick out your old mason jar and somebody throws their penny in, tells their story. It don't mean much to a lot of people, but if enough people do it, that jar starts filling up, and eventually what do? You get change. And that's what we need is change.
Mm-hmm. So, Mike, how let me give you an example. The people that, and I know you can't disclose the people's stories and the people themselves that are in your group, but people like them, let's use. What if we brought in, what if a doctor hypnotized those folks to hear their story under hypnotism, like they did with Betty and Barney Hill, and then publish that, even if it's published under, different names? Does that help that cause?
It can and it can't. I've undergone hypnosis myself, so I at least have a leg to stand on when I say it. I think it's a really great tool if somebody really needs to figure out what happened, if they're in some type of middle ground or they can't process life until they figure out what happened. And I have no problem against anybody getting hypnosis, but I really urge them to look at it from both sides, because the other side is, once that door is opened, you don't know what's on the other side. You can't unsee it once you've opened it. So you have to be really delicate with the hypnosis thing, because sometimes it could be a blessing to the right person. It helps them know, all right, this is real, and now I can deal with it. And for some people, it untriggers a new level of trauma. Right. Now, you've chosen, if you don't want to talk about this, please just tell me, and I respect that, but you've just come out with a book, correct? Yeah, I didn't write it, but local author up in Maine, Nomar Slevik, just wrote a book about my experiences, yes.
And you've actually told your story now.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me, if you can, why did you do that? I mean, people are so afraid in the culture that you're working in every day to help people. They're so afraid of telling their story beyond that group. What motivated you to step up and say, I'm not only going to tell my story, I'm going to actually put it in writing and put it out there?
Yeah, so it was basically, I grew up with most of this alone. I grew up in one of those families. We talked about ghosts. That was fine. That was, everybody believed in them. We had, one of the family members' houses was haunted as far as we all knew. Like, ghosts were nothing. That was fine. We could talk about that all day. But nobody talked about UFOs, and I grew up with all this alone. It wasn't until much later, and I started coming out and speaking forwardly about it, that I realized we actually have some sort of a family history. But what it was for me was, and it wasn't an easy process or an overnight process, I finally got to a point where I accepted it was real, no matter whether I liked it, didn't like it, accepted it, didn't accept it. I got myself to a point that I believed it, that I was like, admitted I'm not crazy. This is happening. And then I looked back and realized I had nobody to help me. And then I realized there's, thousands, if not millions of people in that exact same boat. So I kind of looked at it like, if people were starving and I had a picnic basket full of sandwiches, I'm going to give them out. It's the same idea. I don't want anybody to have to go through what I went through. And I can't stop it on one end, but on this end, like feeling alone, I wanted to change that. That's the difference I wanted to make.
So really, it's as important, at least my opinion is, and by the way, I've read excerpts from the book. It is a book that any person, in my opinion, Tom, that has had a UFO alien type visitation, abduction, observation, they should read this book.
Yes, you're right. They should. It's a good book.
but there's a second tier to that, Mike, correct? The people that also should read this book are their loved ones. Because the person reading the book understands why you wrote it because they're going through it themselves. But the education, Mike, has to be to their loved ones that don't understand it.
Right, and that's also one of the services we provide through Granite Skies is we call breakthrough services. It's a big step for somebody to come out and talk about their own personal experiences, either with me alone or in a group. But they can only do so much with that. They then have to integrate that into their lives.
Right.
And, they might be in a situation where their spouse doesn't believe any of it or their family doesn't believe in it. So we'll also go with them and be like, no, here's, my personal experience. Here's documented cases. Here's, this is really happening. Your loved one, is not insane for this. This is really happening, whether you want to believe them or not. That, I can't tell anybody what to believe, but you still can treat them like a real person. You still can be kind and humane to them.
Right. So, you know what, Tom, as part of, because what Mike is doing with this book is trying to educate people, correct, Mike? You're trying to educate people to the experience, but also how to support and handle the experience. Is that accurate?
Yeah. When me and Nomar first started the book, we didn't have any grand plans for it or like that we were going to do anything different than anybody else. It kind of started like, oh, you have a story, let me tell it. And we kind of figured it'd be like any other UFO book. He'd be like, oh, this happened here at this point, this happened at this point, this happened at this point. He put a little commentary in, along the way. But the more we got into it, we realized it was less about the UFO influence and the extraterrestrial influence. It was more about how a person has to handle it and deal with it in everyday life. And it really became less of a UFO book and more of a human book. It wasn't a book about experiences anymore. It was a book about living through the experiences.
Correct. And it seems to me that, staying with what the Paranormal Zone does, and that is we're trying to educate people. We're trying to give a voice to the whole paranormal community because so many people in the world of paranormal, and the three of us have lived through this for 20 years, we're criticized, we're overlooked, we're ignored. And it's time. This is exactly what we talked to the witches about, Tom. It's time to come out and educate the person that doesn't do this all the time like we do, what it's about. And keeping with that theme, I think that we need to take this book and use this as a tool to educate our listeners.
I agree.
Well, and I think, whether it's UFO, paranormal, Bigfoot, my story's no better than anybody else's. I'm not being interviewed because I'm special or anything like that. The only reason I'm on this show right now is because I opened my mouth and was not afraid to say it. And, for any of your listeners, whether it's paranormal, Bigfoot, UFO, if you've got a story, I'll tell you three of the best people in the world to tell it to are me, Bob, and Tom, because we will listen, and if I can't help you, if it's more Bob's thing, I'll send you to Bob, I'll send you to Tom, and outside of that, we have a whole huge network of people, but I'm only here because I open my mouth, and you can be there too, not because you want to be famous, but you can help somebody too, and you can help yourself by telling your story.
That is so true. That is so true, Mike.
I think, off air, the three of us need to talk about how to use this book as a learning tool for people, Tom. And there's lots of ways we can do that. Certainly, Mike, we do a lot of stand-up presentations in libraries and so forth. And I think sometimes that the UFO portion of this is overlooked in those presentations, in that we don't think there's enough people out there that have the interest. But looking at some of the excerpts of this, it's hard for me to believe that there isn't a lot more people that have experienced what you have that are wrestling with how to tell their story out there. So I think, Tom, we need to reach out in presentations and start to address large groups of people to see if we can't educate them.
That's probably a great idea, Bob, because...
Yeah, Tom, for 25 plus years, you've been educating people to the world of ghosts and paranormal and spirits and mediums and as Steve has, right?
Yes.
Mike Stevens has. So we need to get together and take this to a larger scale. You follow me?
No, I follow you exactly to what needs to be done. Because
we need to do this.
There's too much out there. There's way too much out there. And I run into people all the time because, I mean, people know who I am. People know who you are, Bob. People know who Mike are. I mean, I run into people all the time and they tell me stories and they're like, don't tell anybody. I said, nope, that's not my story to tell. That's your story to tell. And the more you tell, the better it will be to help you out, whether it was a close encounter of the third kind, if we want to keep it at,
Right.
A close encounter with a Bigfoot or some type of other cryptid, because there's many other cryptids out there besides Bigfoot.
Right.
Or a close encounter with even a Casper the Friendly Ghost, we'll say. Because sometimes that's just enough to traumatize somebody. Never mind, the 50 levels of demonic possession and everything else that goes along in the field. Just Casper the Friendly Ghost, if that gets too friendly and, you put the keys down and you're in a rush and the keys get moved and they keep getting moved, that's going to cause people headaches, issues, and everything else, and trust issues for that matter, if they don't believe it's a ghost. So you're right. We need to keep educating and moving the public into a better space where you can go to the local coffee shop like I do every morning or the local breakfast place, Mike, and instead of hearing what's going on in the world of politics today, because that can get dragged out ridiculously.
We all know it's a thing, but let's stay out of that for the day.
Right, exactly. No, what I'm saying is instead of having the political conversation, let's have a paranormal conversation at the coffee shop or a UFO conversation where that dominates the coffee shop, not the, I don't like you because you like A, and I don't like you because you like B. Who really cares? Right. I mean, I hear it every day. Every morning I go out to breakfast. It doesn't matter where I go. I hear it everywhere. I was up at this small little place up in Salem, New Hampshire today, and I heard more political stuff than I do at my regular breakfast place that's all political. So let's change the conversation to go, I have people that will change when I come in, and especially the place I go regularly, they'll ask how the paranormal's going, what's going on and stuff. So the conversation does change, and then some guy will walk by and go, you're not a regular, just somebody who walked in the restaurant who could hear us. You actually believe in that stuff, Tom? I do. And they give you one of those weird looks and they walk out. It's like, I don't really care. Looks don't faze me one bit. I kind of laugh at those. But
and I don't care what anybody believes in a lot of stuff. I'm asking to listen and be kind, especially on this UFO or any paranormal subject. But I'm not real religious myself, and if you are, that doesn't bother me. But there is a church in every corner, of different denominations, different faiths. But every town's got more than one church, and everybody's fine with that, even if they don't agree or subscribe to it.
Right.
It's just, correct. That's part of life. I'm not saying we need a building on every corner, but we need the acceptance to be able to at least have the conversation,
Correct.
We can do it on one thing.
We can do it on everything.
Do it on the other.
Right.
Right.
No, I agree with you,
Mike, tell our listeners the name of your book and where they can buy it.
So the name of the book is Granite Skies, A Disconcerted Journey. That's the subtitle. And it's basically just Nomar basically sat down and in chronological order, detailed, I don't know, 40 or more so accounts that I've had. We left a lot out because they just didn't go with the flow of the book. And I don't want to give away anything, but
no.
a very personal experience and mindset for both of us and why this is so important. I'll say it that way.
Yeah. And where can I find
it? You can find it on Amazon. I think you can even look through, I think Walmart paired up with Amazon, so I think you can even order it through Walmart.com.
Wow.
Nomar has a site. It's his last name, Slevik.store.com. And if you order through there, he's not as big as Amazon. He does have to charge a little shipping, but you get an autograph from him. So, that helps him out. And I think we're saving this for later, but I'll give a little jump right now. I will have some copies on hand at the Exeter UFO Festival happening at the end of this month.
So that's good. So there's plenty of places.
And that's another thing that you've been very proactive in. And I think that sometimes people see that festival that haven't attended it as kind of just a fun time, which it is. It is a fun time. But it's also a time of education because you've got a lot of speakers. I know you speak at it every year. So tell us a little bit about the speakers that are going to be at Exeter.
Yeah, so just a little bit about Exeter to start. I'm not going to get into the whole story, but it is called the festival, and some people go, oh, it's a little hokey. I thought we were taking this serious. We want it to be open to everybody. So there's a lot of kids' activities and parades and concerts and stuff that are free to attend. So no matter what your level of interest in the subject is, you can at least go have a good, free, fun day with your family. But if you're really serious about the topic and want to know more, we have the speaker series inside the town hall. And we have 2 days of speakers. And I just want to mention, this is run by the Kiwanis. This is a Kiwanis event. Nobody's putting money in their pocket. All the proceeds raised go back to local children charities. So that's what makes it such a great event.
Oh, that's
you
awesome.
guys know about this, why I love doing events with you guys. It's always for the money goes back to a cause, whether it's historical upkeep or, maintenance, things like that.
Right.
So it's one of those great events like that.
Well, that's
our
awesome.
Speakers this year, we've got a lot of new faces. We decided to change it up a little bit this year. And so we have a lot of new faces. They're going to cover all aspects of ufology, from sightings, craft, what they are, who they are, how they get here, to I'm going to be talking more about the experiencer side of it. Some people are going to be talking about ancient technology and ancient sites, how they built them. Some's just going to be the history of sightings throughout New England. It's really going to be a good mix for anybody who's coming into this as just a new person, but it's going to have a lot of great information. People have looked at this subject for years as well.
Now, Mike, who are some of the speakers you got coming?
So
you can
as
remember.
you mentioned, I'll be one myself this year. I think you both know her, but if not, Tom definitely does. Valerie LaFaso, who's a local author and paranormal investigator and empathic medium. She'll be there. I think our only other return person is Peter Robbins, who is just well known throughout the UFO community. I think I could use up the rest of the show if I had his bio in front of me. He's done so much. He's spoken at the UN about this topic, worked with Bud Hopkins for years, who was kind of one of the leading pioneers towards abduction research. We have Eric Mintel, who is not only on the UFO side of things, but also does paranormal investigations as well. And then on top of that, he's a world-class pianist. He's going to be giving a concert Saturday night at the festival. He's been invited to the White House twice.
Oh.
Wow.
So, yeah, he's that good. And he's also just into this stuff. So, yeah, he's going to be giving a concert on the piano, plus being a speaker. Laird Scranton, I believe, is one of our speakers. I think he'll be speaking about past technologies and civilizations. And I don't have the list in front of me. And
yeah, sure.
there's a great grouping of people. Some of their names might not be the ones you expect to see. We didn't go for all the famous people. We went for real people that had something to say this year.
Well, that's usually a better draw for people,
All right.
too. So,
yeah,
bringing in people that know what they're talking about.
If somebody is I think Tom and I are going out to the festival. I don't know if we'll make both days, but certainly I think we got to make one of those 2 days, Tom. But,
we're going to have to try. It's going to be a little more difficult for me because down in Lawrence, it's the same weekend as the Italian Feast, and the studio that I run now is live the whole weekend.
Yeah.
And
my question is this, Mike, if one of our listeners that's listening to this podcast tonight goes out to the festival and they haven't told their story yet, is there anybody there that they can tell their story to in private?
I'll be on hand all weekend. Usually I run the trolley tours. This year I just wrote the narrative, and the trolley drivers are going to give it a go at just reading the narrative and do it themselves. So I think they'll do great. Both of these trolley drivers we've had in past years, they've heard me say the same story over and over, all day, and now they have the script to read, so I think they'll be fine. But I'll be on hand all day. Valerie's also a very good person to talk to. Peter's a very good person to talk to. I'm not so familiar with some of the other speakers, but one thing I learned very early in this field is I didn't know anybody. Like, I was a nobody, just like anybody sitting at home listening. And I just had a story to tell, and I didn't know who to tell it to. So I just started reaching out to people, like, people you call famous, because, like, you don't know who else to reach out to. There was no other. And I was amazed at the response. Well, I was amazed I got a response because I was just like, oh, no, they're famous. I'm just, strawfoot, hayfoot. Nobody's going to want to talk to me. But, yeah, no, the response is amazing that the community really is about trying to grow. With anything, you do have some charlatans out there in any field, just who want to make themselves famous or whatever. But that's, there's less of them than there are real people. And I was amazed how they just took me in and just said, hey, yeah, no, if you want to tell a story here, tell it. We're like, well, and so I think I know there's the stereotype, and it's still true. You don't want to lose a job. You don't want to, you don't want to tell your boss and things like that. But as far as the UFO community goes, I think you can almost, anybody who's put themselves out there already, you can probably talk to. I mean, just as a word of caution, just in any life situation, don't play all your cards at once. Make sure you're comfortable and they're the right person. But yeah, there's a lot of good people out there.
No, there are, Mike, actually.
I think it's a great forum for people, especially our listeners, to go out there. If you have a story to tell and you haven't been able to tell it yet to anybody, because this group of people that are doing this, especially the UFO community, really cares about people. I know you do, Mike, 100%. And I just admire you so much for that, because you have really dedicated your life to helping these people. And as you point out, and God knows Tom and I are familiar with this, none of us ever get rich out of what we're doing, at least on this side of it. So your efforts have been unbelievable.
With money.
It's not about money. It's about helping people.
That's where the richness comes in, Bob.
Yeah.
When you help
Yeah.
people out, it comes back
Yeah.
in a good way to help you out. Not with money, but with other things. Happiness and
We have
accomplishments.
Tom and I have a contact down in Massachusetts that has developed a database of people that have had UFO experiences, whether it be abduction, visitation, or observations. And we're Mike right now trying to put together kind of a quasi research team. And we'd love to have you. I know how busy you are, and Tom is too. So we're trying to coordinate this. But I would like to all of us to get together because I honestly think that he's got a database of people that want to tell this story, but I'm not sure there's a lot of places in Massachusetts like you have up here.
Yeah, I know of. Well, there's a group up in Maine. I know Tom's good friends with them.
Right.
Two sisters started it, twin sisters, and they have a Massachusetts chapter, and just the way those things go through connection with them, just talking with people. Same way you guys know people everywhere. I know people in Arkansas, Pennsylvania, California. Like we all know a lot of people, which is good if somebody, from not in the area, but. Yeah, we need more out. Everybody's like, oh, New England's small if you're not from New England. It is compared to some places, but still, if you
right.
You don't want to go 3 hours just to talk to somebody. Like that's a long drive to be like, oh, I don't even know if I want to talk about this. Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you're coming from Connecticut or right on the Connecticut-Mass border, I think that other group's out in Western Mass. I remember vaguely having them on one of my shows years and years and years ago, and I believe they're way out in Western Mass. So, I mean, it would be shorter for them to meet you in southern New Hampshire, and that's still a 2-hour drive, okay, to
but
get out there and talk to
the
people.
The model that Mike has put together, right, over the years, is a model, Tom, that you could roll out in a lot of places. And
yeah, Mike's done a great job with that model, and so hasn't the Hewen sisters too. We're going to try to get them on, at least one of them on the next couple months. I left a message with them, so I'm just waiting for a call back. But they have a real interesting story to tell, as you know, Mike.
Oh, yeah, no, they're great people.
And they're awesome people.
Neither of us, we've all become great friends. I mean, we consider each other family, not even friends, And there's no competition, not like, oh, I need that story. You need, it's just like, no, you're closer. You help them. You know.
Right, because they're...
Yeah, you can meet them in person because you're closer, but like, we don't tell anybody to lose our number. It's like, no, call me if you need to, but they can actually meet you in person. But like,
right, because they're what?
Getting somebody to help.
Right, I mean, they're what? Well, so say you lived in the middle of, like, we'll say Essex County, and you had a UFO experience, and it was a bad one, and you needed support, and you were busy. To get a hold of them, what are they, about 5 hours north of that at least, driving?
Yeah, because that's
straight.
Like an hour from me.
Yeah.
About 3 hours. Debbie's about 2 hours from me. I'm about an hour from you. So,
Yeah. I mean, that's straight driving, and you got this in your head as you're driving up there looking at highways, because that's all you're going to... If you take the back roads, that 3-hour ride turns into a 6-7-hour ride. So you're looking at the main highways going where you're going, and it's running through your head.
Too much time to think.
Right.
So what happens a lot of times is we call it puppy dog syndrome, and it's no offense to anybody. But like, so somebody finally gets there, and they finally get the courage, and they finally get an audience or somebody to talk to where they're not being judged, and they just go blah, 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 because they've had so much, and they've held it up for so long,
Sure.
And so I'm not making fun of them for that. It's like, it's part of the scenario, And
yeah, right.
then they retract because they're like, oh my, what did I just do? Who did I say this to? I said too much. And then you don't hear from that person for like a month or two, you know, maybe send a, like, you know, hey, you doing all right? Like, you know, and then eventually they'll answer back and just be like, yeah, no, I was embarrassed. Like, I thought you were going to judge me and all this stuff. And like, no.
This is a no judgment zone.
It's like I have some great stories, but they're not mine that I can tell you guys. But, you know, keeping people anonymous is so important to this.
Paramount. Yeah.
Because if that's what you promise, that's what you got to get.
Well, that's the most important. Even it doesn't matter if it's UFO, ghost hunting, paranormal. I mean,
field is based on your word,
and
if you can't keep your word, you're not worth anything, right?
And the other thing I'm starting to notice, and I don't throw names, and I'm not going to throw names because this is just a general statement I'm going to make. You now have teams putting on their Facebook page pictures and addresses of houses that they're doing. I mean, it blows my mind.
That's mind-boggling.
Never do that. Unless you own the place and said, hey, we're doing tours,
Right, like a Hilldale or, you know, the James House, the USS, stuff like that, that's a different story. But when it's a private
those are all public places, too.
Exactly. If it's a private home, you can't, I don't get it. It's just like with you, you're not going to put...
We've all done, you know, lectures and stuff, and when it comes to that stuff, we won't even say towns. We'll just say, like, a regional area. Like, we don't want anybody going out and trying to figure it out,
No, you don't.
So, Mike, let me ask you this question. Maybe it's more philosophical than can be answered, but your experience with people in your groups and the feedback you've heard from other people and so forth, what do you think extraterrestrials, what's behind the abductions? What are they trying to do by abducting people?
I think there's many answers. I mean, I think there's many answers. If you ask 300 people, I think you're going to get 312 answers. But I think the biggest thing we have to overcome in asking a question like that is it's not just us versus them. There's no them. There's a lot of them. And so different ones can have different agendas. Sometimes the abductions, I think, are just checkups, like, are you doing good, like monitoring type situations. Tried to steer away from this topic forever because it's so controversial. But I do believe, you know, after doing the research and the studies and talking to people, that it is 100% real. But, you know, it just makes it sound like a lunatic. Which is why it's so hard for people to talk about, is that I do believe certain groups of them do have hybrid programs going on with humans. I think follows family lineage. Like, there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
So that
it's a tough subject. It sure is.
It is. It's a tough subject for some people to swallow and listen to on a, you know.
Ooh, yeah. For some people, it's too hard to even get their heads wrapped around that there's UFOs. And then trying to get them wrapped around the idea that something or somebody is driving this UFO is a totally another step. And then trying to, it progressively gets harder and harder and harder.
That is true.
And do you find, Mike, that people that are
have to try to prove themselves to me or my groups or anything? It's about you. Your experience you might not remember it quite correctly. That's fine. So, but it doesn't mean you're lying. You know what I mean? And that's what people like have a hard time. Like, oh, that's not true. It's like, all right, maybe it's not, but they're not lying. This is their experience.
Right, exactly.
So, Mike, do you find that people that are abducted multiple times?
Yeah, for the most part.
Really?
There's most times when it seems to be a one-off, it seems to be that, like, oh, they were staying with somebody who had multiple abductions or got caught up once. But even then, they can have multiple abductions. For the most part, anybody who's been abducted, it's not just a one and done.
Mm. And yet, one of the biggest abduction cases, Betty and Barney Hill, didn't they only get abducted one time, Tom?
Mike, that's a good one for Mike.
That they reported, because after that they had to deal with it. Betty was really tuned in. People would call her, and she'd almost be snippy on the phone, and she'd be like, "Are you a reporter?" And they're like, "No, ma'am, we just, and then she'd be nice and fine. She'd be like, "Oh yeah, go out here tonight, and you'll see something. Go here, And she was connected with them. I think she had multiple interactions. Barney might have, but never spoke publicly on it. Even, the famous case we talked about earlier, he gets so much crap for the one thing he's talked about that he's still trying to, battle that out. He's not a one and done. He's had multiple abductions. But, he's not going to, he can't say anything publicly about it because he can't back it up. And that's the thing with a lot of these things. People want physical proof for something that's not physical sometimes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, how do you do that? That's impossible. You can't prove a negative, right? So how can you prove something that you have no proof of?
That is true.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous. And that's why we have to take people at their face value, in my opinion. I think that, like you said earlier in this conversation, there are bad people in every profession. I don't care if it's the medical profession or the educational profession. There's bad people in every one of them. But it doesn't taint the whole group. So, to me, do we have people...
All the years I've been doing this, I probably met 2 people who I think were not on the level. One, I think, medically had problems. Just because of other actions in their life and things like that. And the other I don't think they were lying because they wanted to be famous. I think they just wanted to fit in and needed somebody to talk to. And if you're that desperate to talk to somebody, I'll give you 5 minutes of my time. I'll give you 10 minutes of my time. Again, there's something else happening. There's a catalyst for all this. But we can't control that part. We can control how we act as people and how we treat other people. And that's the bigger part.
Yeah, you're right on target with that.
No, you're right on target with that. Mike, we're coming up to the end of the show, but there's one more thing you have not mentioned yet. And I'll give you a couple minutes to talk about it. You're doing something new this year, huh? On Halloween?
Or just before Halloween, we're going to do a skywatch off the USS Salem battleship. I don't think anybody's ever done that other than a couple sailors out at sea looking up wondering, what they were doing, but we've never done it as an event or anything. So that would be cool.
Oh. Well, how cool is that?
That's going to be
When
cool.
is that? When is the event, Mike?
That'll be October 26th, and I believe we'll have Christopher Brown, who's a psychic medium out of Maine, really cool dude. Never met anybody who's like, oh, he was wrong. He's awesome. And I think there'll be an investigation of the ship as well. I don't have all the details yet. But,
that's pretty cool.
Be a fun time. And we're also working on a famous New Hampshire location that has some astronomical values to do some as well. It's pretty much already a done deal, but we're just trying to figure out the schedules. But so I don't want to say their name yet. But
no, that's fine. Yeah, we get that.
No problem, Mike. So you got some great stuff coming up. I'm very happy for you guys. And I want to thank you for coming on tonight, Mike. One last thing. If people want to get a hold of you personally, how can they do that?
So if you go to the internet, the website is granitesky.org, and there's an email button and a contact button, and they can email me. On Facebook, we do have a Facebook page, just Granite Skies. And then I'm out there as Mike Stevens if you really want to find me. But it's all tied together. If you can find one, you can find whatever, which way works best for you.
Yeah, and Tom, for our listeners, they can go to Paranormal NH at yahoo.com, and I'll be happy to refer them over to Mike or whoever they need to get referred to. So, and don't forget to get Mike's book. This book is going to be a special book. I know it's going to be. It's going to be an education to read it, and I think whether you have no interest in extraterrestrials or UFOs, or a lot of interest, you're going to find this book very, very interesting to read.
Yes, it is. And I've read the book, so it is very, very interesting to read.
Yeah, it's going to be a great book, and we thank Mike and the author for the effort put forth for that.
All righty then. Oh, with that, we will be having the author of that book on in the near future. I've been on the phone with him, too. Yes. So I want to thank you, Mike, for coming on tonight. Have a good weekend and have fun in Exeter.
Absolutely.
And Mike, I will see you in Exeter.
All right, yeah, no, and if something else happens, I'm sure we'll all meet up again because you guys hold some great events that, support good causes and help out the local community here in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. So I love both of you guys. Thank you.
All right, no, thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Love you too, brother.
Love you too, Mike. All right. Well, we've come to another end of a great show, Bob. This was an awesome show. Yeah. Mike hit the grand slam tonight.
We got to close on this note that the last time we had Mike on, it was one of the highest rated shows we had.
Yes. So that was good. Yeah. And we're going to make sure it's higher rated than that. The show's growing. Make sure when you listen to this to tell all your friends to subscribe and like to the Lawrence Community Access TV YouTube page. And just one quick last thing. We have a paranormal event this weekend at Haunted Hilldale Cemetery. Starts at 7:30. The gates open. 8 o'clock the ghost hunt starts. And next month we'll be doing trails and sales the whole month. So it's going to be a very busy month coming up. For everybody, and Bob and I, Bob's got some stuff coming up, but we'll discuss that the next show. Unless you want to do it real quick, Bob, if you got some dates. We got any dates yet or no?
What is it?
We got any dates on some of the stuff we discussed yet?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. But I think that you and I got some planning to do.
Yes,
I think we got some big shows coming up, centered around what we just talked to Mike about.
Yes. So we'll get together off air this week, and we'll get together and get this going because I got a busy week too this week. And I want to thank everybody from listening from Massachusetts to Maine to Florida to California to England to Australia to Canada and wherever else in between. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time in the Paranormal Zone. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.